The incident at Gate K7, Oslo. The pre-dawn quiet of Oslo Airport's international terminal hummed with a low thrum of anticipation. Gate K7, bathed in the pale, ethereal glow of early morning, was a nexus of hushed conversations and the rhythmic beeping of travelators. Most eyes, however, were fixed on the elegant, silver-haired man standing unobtrusively near the boarding line. He wasn't obstructing anyone, merely present, a silent observer in a tailored charcoal suit that spoke of quiet authority, a stark contrast to the worn leather briefcase clutched in his hand. Elias Thorne wasn't pressed for time, despite a crucial board meeting in Zurich that afternoon, a meeting that could redefine the trajectory of his global shipping empire. He had learned over the decades that the most significant moments often unfolded in their own deliberate rhythm. He anticipated neither fanfare nor recognition. Anonymity was part of his carefully constructed plan. He wanted to witness the authentic experience, the unvarnished reality far removed from boardroom projections and glossy reports. But even the most meticulously crafted intentions can collide with the unforeseen currents of human perception. As boarding commenced, he moved forward with a measured pace, a slight stiffness in his gait betraying years of relentless travel. He presented his digital boarding pass to the gate agent, a young woman with tired eyes who barely glanced at the screen before gesturing him onward. Inside the aircraft, the recycled air felt sterile, impersonal. He walked past the discreet partition that subtly demarcated the premium cabin, unaware he had crossed an invisible boundary until a voice, crisp and laced with impatience, cut through the quiet. "Sir, economy is to your left. Please don't impede the flow." The tone was not overtly hostile, but carried that ingrained air of superiority, the cadence of someone accustomed to unquestioning compliance. Elias turned to face a slender woman with impeccably styled blonde hair and a sharp, almost imperceptible frown etched between her brows. Her name tag identified her as Astrid Berger, senior cabin attendant. He blinked slowly. "I believe my seat is on this side. First class is strictly reserved, sir. I'm going to need you to move now. I'm simply locating seat 3A. Perhaps I misread." He patted his inner jacket pocket, then his trouser pocket, feigning a search for his reading glasses, his hands deliberately unsteady. Astrid didn't wait. She gestured pointedly towards the rear of the plane, her voice now amplified as she spoke in her headset. "Control, we have a passenger requiring assistance near row 1, possibly disoriented or in the incorrect section." The inflection in her voice was dismissive, as if he were a misplaced item on an inventory list. A younger male flight attendant, dark-haired and earnest, stood nearby, his name tag reading Kai. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then hesitated, his gaze towards Elias conflicted, a flicker of unease suggesting a better judgment suppressed. Behind them, a few early boarding passengers shifted restlessly. One man muttered, loud enough to carry, "Some people think a different class of ticket materializes out of thin air." A nervous chuckle rippled through the immediate vicinity. The curtain swayed as a uniformed ground agent appeared. "We'll assist you in finding your assigned seat, sir," he said, already reaching for Elias's arm. Elias offered no resistance, no argument. He simply lowered his gaze to the plush carpet and allowed himself to be guided towards the rear. His worn briefcase brushed against his leg with a soft thud as he walked. 3A, aisle seat, no window. The recline mechanism felt stiff, resistant. He settled into it, as if it were his predetermined place. For a long moment, he stared at the safety card tucked in his seat pocket, his fingers tracing the embossed airline logo, a logo he had personally approved decades ago. He inhaled deeply and looked out into the aisle. People continued to board, their movements a flurry of bags and hushed voices. Nothing paused. Then, almost inaudibly, he murmured, "I conceived this airline, and they still fail to recognize me." The woman in the adjacent seat didn't react, her noise-canceling headphones firmly in place. But a young tech entrepreneur across the aisle, his phone already poised, captured it all. The tone, the expression, the quiet resignation. He didn't upload it immediately, but later, as the sleek aircraft sliced through the vast expanse of the Nordic sky, he would, and the world would begin to witness a silent man who had never sought the spotlight. Seat 3A was near the forward lavatory, a high-traffic zone. It carried a faint scent of antiseptic and lingering jet fuel. Elias offered no complaint. He merely adjusted his long legs in the confined space and leaned his head against the cool window, which offered a sliver of a gray, overcast sky. The drone of the engines filled the silence in his mind, but it couldn't entirely suppress the memory. It was nearly 15 years prior, a different flight, a different era. He wasn't a passenger then. He was conducting an unannounced audit. Back then, Elias still wore impeccably tailored suits on every flight. He recalled that day vividly because of a young mother in the last row who had requested a blanket for her shivering child, not once, but 3 times, and been met with dismissive indifference each time. Elias had observed it all from his aisle seat in first class. He had said nothing. He hadn't forgotten the mother's pleading eyes. How many small indignities were silently endured, he wondered, just to maintain a semblance of peace. How many learned to shrink themselves, to become invisible, to avoid such encounters? A soft clink near him broke his reverie. Kai, the young flight attendant, stood beside him, holding a small, steaming cup. The young man hesitated, then leaned in and whispered, "Sir, a chamomile tea. I thought you might appreciate something warm." Elias looked up slowly, his gaze steady. "Thank you. I apologize for the earlier misunderstanding," Kai continued, his voice barely above a whisper. It didn't feel right, the way the entire situation. Elias accepted the cup, his fingers brushing against Kai's. "You didn't intervene." Kai's face tightened, a flicker of shame in his eyes. He stepped back without a word. Elias didn't watch him go. The warmth of the cup seeped into his hands. A small, unexpected comfort in a pressurized metal tube, where judgments were often rendered before a single word was spoken. Further ahead, Ingrid Svensson, a senior executive with Elias's company, sat in seat 8F, her fingers flying across her laptop. An email titled "Urgent Executive Strategy Session, Zurich HQ" dominated her screen, marked high priority. In the second line, her breath hitched. "Mr. Elias Thorne will be in attendance." No photograph accompanied the name, just the stark, unmistakable moniker. Suddenly, her mind raced back to the brief commotion during boarding, the distinguished older man, the sharp exchange with Astrid, the way he had been directed towards the rear, his face briefly visible, etched with a quiet dignity. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Impossible. It couldn't be him. Not Elias Thorne, the visionary founder, the man who had single-handedly built the global enterprise she now helped manage. She glanced back towards economy. He was almost completely obscured from her vantage point, just the top of his silver head resting against the seat back, still almost part of the aircraft itself. Ingrid's pulse quickened. She minimized the email and opened a blank document, her thoughts a whirlwind of disbelief and dawning realization. If it was him, they had a problem of catastrophic proportions. The wheels of the aircraft touched down smoothly at Zurich Airport just after 10:15 a.m., the familiar bump and reverse thrust a prelude to the seatbelt signs, illuminating and the collective sigh of arrival. Elias remained seated, his hands resting calmly on his briefcase, untouched at his feet. Decades of air travel had attuned him to the subtle shifts in atmosphere upon landing, not just the mechanical ones, but the human currents that could ripple with unforeseen consequences. Astrid Berger appeared in the aisle, clipboard in hand, her stride deliberately professional, her expression a carefully constructed mask of airline neutrality. She stopped at his row, her gaze direct. "Sir, we require you to remain on board for a few additional moments. There appears to be a minor discrepancy with your documentation. Ground personnel will be with you shortly." Her tone was ostensibly helpful, but a subtle undertone of finality lingered beneath the surface, as if she were reciting a well-rehearsed line she didn't fully comprehend. Elias looked up slowly. "Is that so?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed Astrid's polished facade, but she maintained her composure. "We appreciate your cooperation." He offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile, devoid of warmth. The cabin was now a stream of disembarking passengers, most barely giving him a second glance, except for a few whose eyes lingered, a subtle unease registering in their expressions. An older gentleman being asked to wait behind. Again, one woman paused, leaning slightly towards him. "Are you all right, sir?" she whispered, her eyes filled with a genuine, if fleeting, concern. Elias nodded once, his face impassive, but a deep weariness settled within him. At the front of the plane, Ingrid Shrinson had already made her decision. The moment the wheels had touched down, she had discreetly texted her executive assistant. "It's him, Elias Thorne. There has been a grave error. I am addressing it directly." She stood, her tailored suit a statement of quiet authority, and moved against the flow of passengers, her gaze fixed. Astrid noticed her approach just as Ingrid reached row 3. "I will handle this," Ingrid stated, her voice low, firm, and imbued with an undeniable command. Astrid blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me." Ingrid leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "The man you just instructed to remain seated is Elias Thorne." A stunned silence hung in the air. Astrid's carefully constructed composure crumbled, her face paling visibly. "You mean the Elias Thorne?" Ingrid offered a curt nod. "Founder, chairman emeritus, the architect of this entire organization." Astrid's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Behind them, Elias slowly rose from his seat. He didn't rise with any air of self-importance, but with a quiet, undeniable presence. He straightened his jacket, his gaze meeting Ingrid's. "Mr. Thorne, I was completely unaware," Astrid stammered, her voice trembling. "Protocol." Elias raised a hand, cutting her off gently. "I believe," he said, his voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable weight, "it is time we re-evaluated the protocol." The air in the cabin stilled. Even the remaining passengers sensed the shift, a palpable change in the atmosphere. Whispers rippled through the aisle. A businessman halfway down the plane leaned towards his companion, his eyes wide with dawning recognition. Several passengers discreetly reached for their phones. A profound sense of unease, bordering on shame, settled over the cabin. It wasn't outrage that filled the space, but a dawning awareness of a significant transgression. Ingrid stepped forward. "Mr. Thorne, my car is waiting." Kai, the young flight attendant, had also approached, his face a study in regret. His eyes met Elias's, a silent apology conveyed. Elias offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. "I saw you," his eyes seemed to say. Then, he lifted his briefcase and began to walk towards the exit, Ingrid a respectful distance behind him. No fanfare, no backward glance. Yet, in his wake, the silence in the aircraft grew louder than any apology ever could.